Mechanika, the Clockwork Assassin. So, I think I actually have the first appearance of Lady Mechanika back, gosh, years and years ago. I remember reading it because it's like, oh, this is new, this is interesting, this is, kind of sexy, this is kind of cool. But I didn't know anything about it. I didn't know anything about Joe Benitez. I still really don't know anything about Joe Benitez. So I picked it up, and I remember not being all that impressed by it, that very first issue. I remember thinking that it was a concept that was simultaneously really silly, but also took itself way too seriously. And I also never really understood what Lady Mechanika herself is supposed to be. The issue that I read, at least, way back when, didn't really get into that. I'm just going to keep calling her a steampunk cyborg because I really don't know. I don't know what she is. I don't know why she has red and black eyes. I don't know why she has apparently super strength and super speed and stuff like that. Why her limbs are sort of like biomechanical. But I'm just going to roll with it. The series has a couple of things that are automatically not all that exciting to me. For one thing, it's all about steampunk, which I don't hate steampunk. In point of fact, I actually just got John Delaraz's For Steam and Country in the mail the other day, so I'm looking forward to reading this. But at the same time, it's not something that's terribly exciting to me. And also, this story in particular, The Clockwork Assassin, is a detective story, and it's like a pure detective story. Like, the detective story isn't a framing device. This is all about who is the Clockwork Assassin, who's controlling her, that sort of thing. So I detective stories for me, they're either way too obvious or they're way too obtuse. So it's hard for me to get into them. So this one came out last week. I didn't get around to making the video about it, and it wrapped up this 3-issue arc. I guess they don't publish this monthly. I guess they do it always like this, where they publish it in arcs. So we'll just go briefly through the story. I was not a big fan of this. I really only bought it just for the sake of seeing how it ended after the first issue. But there are just a lot of elements to it that I really didn't like. And also, this was like months ago that I read this, so I don't really remember all of the plot points. But here we see that it's very wordy, and this is something that happens throughout all 3 issues. Lots and lots of talking. So we see these 2 guys. Yep, the one dude's killed, and then we're at the funeral. And so this is our lead heroine, but the thing is, a lot of the scenes of her, a lot of the scenes in the book in general, focus on these other characters who don't have anything obviously interesting about them. I don't remember any of their names. I don't remember really any of their personalities. I even had a hard time telling some of them apart. But there are a lot of supporting characters in this book, which is something that I've noticed a lot about female-led titles, even when they're written by a man, is that they have really large supporting casts. The lead heroine is often not given a necessarily as much spotlight as she maybe deserved, and I don't know why that is. Part of the problem, and not only that, I would have a hard time describing to you what Mechanika's personality herself is. She's pretty aloof, but not necessarily cold. She's very good at like tinkering and inventing stuff. She's very good at science, but she doesn't seem to have any like obvious strengths or weaknesses. And I realize that this has been published, on a semi-regular basis for years now. And even though it's broken up into these arcs, I realize I'm coming into the story really late. But I kind of remember this stuff even from that first issue I read all those years ago. That Mechanika herself didn't, other than her look, which is very unique, she didn't have a whole lot going for her herself. And so we've got all these side characters and all these intrigues and all these relationships and all these politics that I have a hard time following. There's a lot of like corporate espionage and intrigue stuff. Like, this lady is the head of some major industrial corporation, and she's trying to recruit people, and the people that she's known in the past are being offed by the this Clockwork Assassin character, and I don't know. And we just get lots and lots of talking, lots of exposition, lots of going over past relationships and plot points that if you're like me, if you're just joining in, you have no clue who any of these people are. You've probably been watching the pages so far, but Lady Mechanika has really not been in very many pages. She finally gets spotlight at the very end during this dream sequence, and then we see her in her nightie. It's funny, Joe Benitez actually did a really dope alternate cover for Metal, and I couldn't track it down because, and if I'd seen it, I probably would have bought it. It had nothing to do with the story. It was just a variant, but it was still pretty dope. So yeah, just yeah, it's like you've got this cool world, you've got this sort of steampunk Victorian London, and this entire issue, with the exception of this page and the page at the very beginning where the one guy's killed, it's so much talking, so much relying on relationships of characters that are not really well introduced. And it doesn't really get a whole lot better from there. I'm not gonna lie, I don't even really remember this issue. Let me flip through it, see if anything strikes out. Yeah, I think that was the issue I had. I don't remember. Anyway, okay, so this part here was kind of cool. Something actually happens in this issue where she does some espionage stuff against the one lady industrialist that we saw in the first issue. Okay, so in this issue, this is where we find out at least what the Clockwork Assassin is. So she tackles. So Mechanika confronts the Clockwork Assassin, and it turns out that the assassin is not a person; it's actually an automaton, and it gets away from her. And so then we have to find out who she is. So this one at least picked up a little bit in terms of the action, in terms of like things actually happening, but so it's a little bit more simplistic, but I don't know. It's still kind of based on a lot of plot points and a lot of things that are set up in the first issue, and what happened a lot in the first issue was dependent on you understanding certain character relationships that weren't that were hinted at but weren't fully explored, or they were explored too much and it told you way too much information. I don't really know how to fix it. I couldn't really tell you what you should have done, whether you should have done differently. Here we do at least see Mechanika. It doesn't, like, this espionage sequence, it doesn't come easy for her. She actually does have to try. She actually does have to struggle to make it work. So there is some tension in it. There is some action. There is some intrigue. But unfortunately, the third issue, which I read just a few days ago, does not capitalize on that. So here we just get more talking and more talking and more talking and more characters that we don't care about, and more talking and more talking and some stuff here, and this is where the mystery finally comes to a head, and turns out this is what I mean. It's like this where mystery stories are either too obvious or they're too obtuse. It turns out that it was this lady's daughter who had been crippled by a lab accident that the people who she was killing had been involved in. Her father had been killed in it, I think. I don't remember. Jeez. Why are they wearing hijabs in freaking, like, super hijabs in Victorian-era steampunk London? Whatever. Would young women back in, like, the 19th century have even worn the hijab? Because that's the hijab thing is like much more recent than you think it is. At least the idea of it being worn by every woman throughout all of the society, that's much more recent than you'd think it would be. And also, I don't know exactly when this story is supposed to take place. If you read Frankenstein, like the actual book, there's an extended sequence where the monster observes this sequence where they bring in this girl from a Muslim country. I don't remember which Muslim country. and she's talking about how oppressive it is and how much better England is. Mary Shelley was obviously English, and she was also a feminist. Her mother was one of the first recognized feminists in the world, Mary Wollstonecraft. She takes time out of the book and to write a sequence about how much better British Empire era England is than wherever these women are from. I don't know. But here we've got this English industrialist, this very progressive-minded. I would have thought she'd have the same kind of civic patriotism that would have been expected of all upper-class people back then, and she's employing multiple Muslim guards. Maybe they're not Muslim. I mean, they do have brown skin and brown eyes, but I'm pretty sure it's supposed to be a hijab. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. Anyway, the book, I don't know. There's more talking. There's more stuff that's not set up by anything. Something finally happens at the end where she kicks the crap out of this robot. It finally ends in a cool way, but there comes a point where the more you explain something, the more complicated you make it. And I feel like where this book went into a lot of detail into a lot of side and supporting characters' backstories in order to make the story work. I feel like if they had done that less of it, it would have actually made it make more sense. Instead, it kept adding more and more details and layers to the story about the specific corporate intrigue that went on behind the scenes, and it just made it more confusing and complicated. It could be that I'm just stupid and I'm not keeping up with the series the way that it should be, but this is a fill-in 3-issue arc, and it could have been done. Old school Marvel would have done this in 1 issue, this whole story, and it would have been more. In any case, tell me what you thought of this. In any case, tell me what if I'm missing something, if this was just a weak arc, if there are better stories that I should read. In any case, this is Unranked Chevron signing off.